Fantastic. What strategies have you found most effective in fostering an environment where employees or team members feel safe to express their true selves, including their ideas, concerns, and aspirations?
Yeah. So I'll name my top three, and they won't come as a surprise. So, because I've talked about a couple of them, I think the first one is belonging. And belonging is how I choose to define what's more broadly often called DEI. And the way we define belonging at Neiman Marcus Group actually is diversity plus equity plus inclusion equals belonging. And my focus is belonging is the outcome. None of those other things in and of themselves matter. They matter if they, in combination, result in a person feeling like they belong where they are. And I sort of often say, like, I don't know if any kid comes home from school and says to their parent, well, I'm not experiencing an environment of diversity and inclusion at school today. What they'll say is, I don't feel like I belong. It's a feeling. It's a feeling. And so, but what I love about the formula is you can break down the feeling, which is what human beings are all about, into evidence-based components that are part of a system to create that experience, that emotional, psychological experience of belonging, which is what our belonging strategy at Neiman's is about. So I think that's one is belonging, and this is a science actually, and it started. The concept comes from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which most people are taught at some point in psychology, and the third of the five basic human needs shared by all people is what he called belonging or love, the need to belong to a group. And this comes out of evolutionary psychology, of course, right? That we all kind of know from evolutionary psychology that if you got it, among our ancestors, our hunter-gatherer ancestors, if you got kicked out of the tribe, you would die because you wouldn't have any food. You'd be preyed on by animals or other tribes or whatever. And this still lives with us. So it's a very important part of creating that sense where people feel like they can be their true selves. Is you can't feel psychologically safe unless you feel like you belong. And so it's a very important thing. And we have a whole concept called bias interrupters that are part of our strategy to interrupt the bias that causes people to not feel like they belong, that I can go into if you want to. The second one is growth mindset, which I mentioned. And the reason I feel like that is important to creating an environment where people feel safe is that a feeling of not being psychologically safe often arises from a fear of making a mistake. So the opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset, and fixed mindset comes from environments, whether it's educational or vocation, workplace or whatever, where people feel like that if they make a mistake, they're going to get in trouble, their career is over, all these sorts of things. When you foster an environment of growth mindset where you say, I believe that learning from mistakes creates a person and an organization that performs better, because that's actually true. Then you make it safe for people to make mistakes. And so this is where you have leaders, for example, who talk about a mistake they made or a failure, what they learned from it and how they made things better. Continuous improvement comes from growth mindset. So when you embrace this, you tell people it's okay to make a mistake as long as you learn from it and you make things better. And this is where the concept of agile comes from, is you fail early, fix it before you invested too much time and energy, and move on. The third would be transparency. And so this goes with the other two, that people feel unsafe when things are secret and hidden that are meaningful and might affect them. So in a company, the idea that you share as much as you can share about the business, about the decisions that are made, about why things happen the way they do, it creates more of a sense of security in people. Because insecurity, psychological, physical, comes from not knowing, right? Fear of the future and what might happen because I don't understand what might happen next.
I could just listen. I just love this. This is just so. It's so interesting, and it just works with how I'm thinking at the present moment. It's just lovely. How do you navigate the challenges that come? Yeah, we've just done this one, haven't we? How do you navigate the challenges that come with encouraging authenticity in a diverse? That's the one we've just done.
Well, I didn't say the challenges that come with it because I can give you a couple things.
Yeah,
I
just a
do.
couple.
I think so. Again, this comes sometimes there's this conflation that authenticity means speaking your mind, and so people say, "Oh, if you encourage authenticity, it creates conflict." And what I would say is, speaking your mind is not authenticity
Mm,
necessarily. I mean, to me, authenticity is what you say and what you do match. And
mm,
so I think in an environment where you're trying to encourage people through growth mindset to make mistakes and talk about them and get better, when you're focused on transparency and being open about what's happening so everyone can learn from what's working and not working, really teaching belonging, which is to me what belonging is, it's a set of evidence-based techniques for communicating with other people, listening and resolving conflict. It's not what people think DEI is. Oh, I'm going to teach you about other groups as
mm,
if other groups are a monolith. It's actually teaching people how to effectively interact with other people who have different beliefs and listen and negotiate and reach agreement. So that's what we do is we actually teach these techniques for how you can communicate with other people better. And so we use, for example, we use the Enneagram as a way to teach people about the differences and different ways that people show up in the world. We teach something from nonviolent communications
right.
that we call the creating connections technique, which is a technique when you're in conflict with someone for depersonalizing it.
Mm,
This is how you can have authenticity in the workplace. Let people be able to respectfully express their differences and resolve them. It's not about throwing a whole bunch of stuff out there in the
mm,
open. It's really teaching people through evidence-based techniques, how do you become a human who can engage with other people in a common set of interests, right?
mm.
We're all working together to try to satisfy
Right.
and fulfill the needs of as many customers as possible and drive more sales and earnings. That's our common goal that protects
Mm,
our company and our jobs. So how do we do that? And we're always going to have disagreements and stuff sometimes. So it's about expecting it and then providing an environment where people can learn how to get better at doing it. That's that simple. Because I do think belonging is one, as I said, and I've explained that. Growth mindset is a second, and I've kind of explained that
yeah.
and why I think growth mindset leads to it. Transparency
Yeah,
is a
agility.
third. I could give you, I guess I could give you two practices that I think
Yeah,
really anybody could
that
do.
would be
So I
great.
think, so I think a good example would be we're very transparent about what our employees say they want and need and what we're doing about it. So it started back with that survey I mentioned that I did going back to 2019, and we've repeated it multiple times to identify what matters most to our people and then act on it. So every time we change or add a policy, a procedure, or practice that is reflective of what people ask for, we tell them basically, you asked, we did. Like, for example, one of the things that our people desperately wanted that we didn't have back in 2019 was paid parental leave. Because as you know, in the United States,
Yeah.
we're at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to that. And in this particular industry, in retail, in general, certainly at that time, almost no one had paid parental leave for all employees. And so it costs money, et cetera. So when we decided to do this, it was hugely impactful. But when we talked to our people about it, we specifically referenced in our people strategy survey, you said this was one of the most important things to you. This is why we're doing it. And we've done that subsequently with other policy changes and things, to say so that people hear, oh, I was vulnerable. I went and I said what I wanted in this survey, and you heard me and you responded to that. Equally, when we couldn't do everything, we said it. Like we said, out of the 18 things we tested in our survey, we're going to focus on the top 4 or 5 at first. And we may not get to some of the things down the list for several years because that's truthful. And we didn't. They said, onboarding needs to be better, for example, but they ranked that farther down the list in importance. So we haven't made all of the improvements that we wanted to make yet in that process because we prioritize what they said mattered most, and we keep telling them that. So that's an example of transparency. The other two I would give you, I think one is four is role modeling for me, and that is that your leaders regularly practice role modeling authenticity, which a component of which is vulnerability, because they have power. So when they demonstrate being vulnerable, not being perfect, for example, or how they're different from the majority, it emphasizes that other people who see themselves in the workforce, who see themselves as different, can take that leap of faith, dip the toe in the water, and do it also. So there was I have to give you examples. That our CEO, he discussed in several media interviews coming out at work, part of Pride Month, and he didn't have to do that. And there aren't very many CEOs who are LGBTQ who are open, but the few who are don't often talk about it. And that was one. I think similarly, our chief integrated retail officer talked about in the media at one point an anti-Asian harassment incident that she and her child experienced in a parking lot, and did it in order to draw attention, using her position to draw attention to the fact that even someone in a position of great authority and power experiences these kinds of things. So I think that's important. And then last, I would say incentivizing authenticity. And so that's two examples I would give you. So when I was at Gap, one of the ways we wanted to incentivize people to really experiment with the results on the work environment was we had a contest called Do Something Scary. And people got publicly recognized and prizes. And that was if they did something scary, like if they didn't have a meeting in the middle of the day, go to a movie or something, or to demonstrate like I can have control of my time as long as I'm getting my job done. Similarly, here we have a program going on right now through the end of the year called I Work Smarter. I Work Smarter is one of the pillars of the NMG Way of Working, and it's about being efficient. But to do this, it means it's like things like calling out processes or reports or meetings that are inefficient and not valuable. And that's hard to do. That takes bravery to do, but it's in the best interest of the company. So we're not wasting our time or our investors' money. And so we're incentivizing it. So people in each one of our functions can nominate teams or people, and then they win, and they actually win a monetary award. And then what happens is then they get rolled up each month, and then there's a whole company one, and somebody wins for the whole company. And at the end of this fall, when we have our awards ceremony for our broader awards ceremony based on our values, one of the awards is going to be the I Work Smarter. It's going to be for the whole year. What is the biggest example of working smarter? And so, again, incentivizing, making it public and rewarding in some way, even if it's monetarily or whatever, people for engaging in the behaviors you want to see, especially if there's any risk associated or perceived risk, like critiquing the company process or saying, nobody reads this report that maybe somebody once created, right? So that's an example.